John Phelps, 24/7 World Radio Podcast here on this cold Friday night of February 2025. And we are blessed to have my dear friend and associate, Dr. Jeff Sullender, double board certified nutritionist. He's been at it for a few years, I think, maybe 40 years, maybe.
Oh, I hate to say how many.
So I want to welcome Dr. Jeff to our broadcast. He's going to be on every Friday evening. So I will have him on 4 times a month. And I had some requests for him, and I've been wanting to have him on too. So I finally got around to it, put it in my pocket. So I have this to it that's round, and I'm inviting Dr. Jeff back. So Dr. Jeff, welcome to the broadcast.
Well, thank you, Brother Eric. It's nice to be here again and nice to have a engaging conversation.
I love it. So what do you have on the schedule for this evening, my brother, between half an hour, 45 minutes?
Well, we have so many things. Since last time we spoke, there's been so much coming out, so much revelation in science and biology and physics that is really adding and transforming what we know and giving us better tools on how to be healthy. It really is amazing. So I think we can begin in a number of topics. I have a few that we can earmark for certainly the next couple of times we meet to talk and dig into them because they're very meaty, but they're also, although they seem complicated at first, the biology may be complicated, the application is very easy.
That's the truth of it. The application is simple. The biology is, one stone upon another, so it looks incomprehensible to the average guy, but the remedy is easy. So I'm glad to hear you say that.
It is. So I always tell people, if I'm presenting this, whether it's to clients or elsewhere, is it's okay. I know it's a lot of complicated stuff. Don't get anxious or panicky, because the takeaway of what do I do is actually quite simple. And many of these things are not even costly things. They're mostly habits. But the habit we take on has to come from knowing what we're doing and why.
That's right.
And that's the beauty of all this.
One of the things I've always said is, when you look at some food you're going to eat, you ask yourself, do I want to put my body through the calisthenics of digesting that? And if I do, it better be good for me, because if it's bad for me, what a terrible decision and a waste of energy. Go ahead, brother.
Well, and a lot of things we take in, we may say it's a special occasion or a treat or, oh, what the heck. They don't come out so quickly. I mean, if you go back to the research on trans fats, which people are now aware of as being bad for us, but there was a time when they were presented as being better than butter and better than cholesterol. But, the half-life of trans fats, once they're in your body, is 2 years.
Really? 2 years?
2 years to get half of those trans fats back out. So that indulgence you had on that special occasion is going to haunt you for quite a long time.
Oh, 2 years. That's an amazing fact. The body is rebuilt in 7 years.
Right.
So you think 2 years, that's a long time for that toxin to be in you, coursing around and lowering your immune system and your energies. Yeah.
So a lot of things have impacts, and we're learning now, and the one area I'm finding very fascinating is kind of emerging with its own identity, which I guess you really have to do, because we're moving out of, I guess you might say Newtonian biology more into a quantum biology, which is actually what they're calling it. And there's a number of researchers and physicians who are trying to bring this out, because a lot of it's counterintuitive to the Newtonian style we were taught. And while that's good, it just makes us have to rethink some of the things we thought we knew, because a lot's come out saying that maybe we weren't so accurate on some things.
Amen. I mean, Sir Isaac Newton was not a truth teller, and as far as I'm concerned, a great deceiver. And he was also a member of a powerful secret society. So if we can move away from his presumptions that we've all been brainwashed with, we'll be better off.
Well, one of the big areas, and I think nutrition has to step up, and that's what's happening now in this great transformation. It's fine to look at vitamins and minerals and fats, proteins, and carbohydrates. That's important, but it's actually not where the power lies in terms of energy production, because I'll bet you most of the listeners would like to have more energy.
Definitely.
I mean, who wouldn't? So
Yep.
the question then comes into how do we produce energy and from what? What are the sources and how do we take care of that system and enhance it, in fact?
Hmm.
And that comes at a higher level than just looking at nutritional labels or fats, protein, and carbohydrate content. Not that it's wrong, it's just not the whole story. So we have to expand our understanding that light, photons, are actually a nutritional element. We have to consume light energy.
Makes
And
perfect
because
sense.
our biology is really designed to, and this is actually quite surprising. Every time I've dug into this, it's like, wow, I didn't know that because it wasn't known 20 years ago.
Hmm.
It just was not known.
Well, I think the theory of man shall live by bread alone spread through all the sciences, and there was nothing beyond that. And so to say that you gain energy by light, it sounds like some spooky witchcraft statement, but which it's not.
Well, it's not. And, if we can kind of jump in a little bit here, we can look at, I mean, we're in, and everybody maybe remembers from their, I don't know, biology classes in high school or somewhere that they talk about the mitochondria as being the powerhouse of the cell is the phrase that's often used. That's where we typically produce energy. And all of our cells have, except for red blood cells, have mitochondria. And that's where, through a rather complicated process, we actually take food, we strip off the electrons, and then we move the electrons through the mitochondria to create energy. So whether we're looking at a fat or a protein or carbohydrate, ultimately what that has to be reduced down into is giving our mitochondria an electron. Because
which
that's
is
all it processes.
which is electrical.
Exactly. It's a negative charge.
I found that things negative for us are good for us. Things
Well,
positive.
yeah, exactly. And a lot of what's being said now in terms of health and longevity is, and when we eat good food, it has a lot of electrons in it. Fresh food has more electrons than hyper processed food or
Yes.
old, dead, decayed food. So if we're
Yes.
going to have more electrons move through our mitochondria, we have to take them in the first place.
Yes. Like I eat my meat fairly raw now. I mean, I had a piece of venison today. I cooked it about 10 seconds on one side and about 10 seconds on the other, put a little special herbal spice on it, and it's warm enough to cook each side, but on the inside it's raw. And
Hmm.
it's warm and it was delicious and,
Hmm.
easily digestible.
Well, exactly. And that's why health conscious people typically don't do much with leftovers. You try to cook enough for the meal and not enough where you're going to have it sitting in your refrigerator, literally losing energy.
Yes, losing energy.
And or you overcook it to the point where it's just nothing but pulp and maybe some protein, but energetically doesn't have anything to contribute.
Hmm.
So ultimately, now where's the energy in the food come from? I mean, all the food that we eat, whether it's direct or indirect, the energy in the plant, in the vegetable, and the broccoli comes from the sun through photosynthesis.
Yes, comes from the light. Hmm.
So without the photons from the sun's energy, the plant doesn't produce any food, and the animal, of course, eats the plant.
Right.
So all the electrons that we're taking in ultimately come from the sun. It's just processed through different stages in animals and plants and roots and tubers and so forth. But ultimately, we're trying to get more electrons in.
Hmm. Makes perfect sense. So we should establish a diet based upon the maximum amount of electrons we can get in our system.
Exactly. Exactly. Now, one might say, well, this is interesting, but we're trying to really give more fuel in a friendly form to our mitochondria. Why would we go through such effort? Why is it so important? Well, it's interesting research. If we look at uh, probably one of the most preeminent researchers in mitochondrial areas, Dr. Doug Wallace at Children's Hospital in Philadelphia. And he's done some amazing research on mitochondria over the 30, 40 years he's headed that lab. But 85 to 90% of all chronic diseases, and if you look at America today, what do you see?
Oh, terrible.
It's a sea of chronic disease.
Yeah, like what, 1 out of 3 people with cancer, and how many
Yep.
with quote unquote heart disease? What a goofball name. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So 85 to 90% of all chronic disease relates to mitochondrial dysfunction. That's pretty profound. Our mitochondria have been damaged, compromised, much of it by our own doing because we don't understand what we do. But that's a big impact. So it also provides the answer if we're going to learn how to take care of and support the mitochondria and not do stupid things which poison them.
It would be interesting to know the effects of vaccines on the mitochondria of children as they begin to develop. I bet that all of them stunt the growth of the child, to intoxicate the liver, all the real vital glands necessary for growth and maturity. And from the very get-go, they are destroying our mitochondria and our most important organs.
Well, I just pulled up an article because I always like to go online and look at the research. And if I hear a podcast, which I often do by some researchers or people talking, I like to pause the podcast, and if they quote an article, I go look it up.
Mm-hmm.
I want to see, number one, if they're speaking truthfully, and number two, look at the study and look at, okay, what are they saying? What are the conclusions? Of course, who funded the study, that kind of thing. But I pulled up a study here about an hour ago, and it's from October 2024 in Biochemical Pharmacology, and it says that our very popular non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs, the Motrins, the Advils, and all that, they're mitochondrial poisons.
And they're designed that way.
Right.
These Jesuit chemists are brilliant men, and they have all the money they could ever want, all the brains they could ever hire, to then get the end game of what they want for the destruction of targeted populations in Western civilization, pursuant to the Counter-Reformation doctrines. So it goes all the way down to science. And
the hijacking of science.
And the hijacking of science. And all these massive studies, nobody can look into all those massive studies, so they just accept their conclusion is true. And that's the hook.
Right. So it may be one thing to say, okay, maybe you had some surgery and you've got some pain post-surgery, and maybe you can say, I need some kind of pain relief to manage that. But the real issue is for a lot of people, they're popping anti-inflammatories for headaches and menstrual cramps, and they did too much in the garden, and that chronic use or overuse is what creates the long-term damage.
Yeah.
And we just don't think, because we think pain is something to suppress and move on. And not asking, why do I have pain?
That's right. Absolutely right. We've been trained to do exactly the opposite of what we should do.
Yeah. Now, here's an interesting point that I heard a couple of years ago, and I've since checked it out, and it's coming out more and more. In every cell in our body, we actually have two different genomes. Really? And modern medicine likes to focus on what we call the nuclear genome, the DNA, and they're going to develop some special nuclear or DNA-based cancer treatment or vaccine or something like that. But the genome they don't talk about, which is distinctly separate, is the genome of the mitochondria. I see. Because the mitochondria have an entirely different DNA genome. It's not the same as the nuclear genome. And the mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell. And so for every cell in your body, whether it's a liver cell, a brain cell, a heart cell, to do whatever it's designed to do, it has to have energy. It has to have healthy mitochondria, but the controlling DNA in the mitochondria are not the same. They're distinctly different from the nuclear genome. Wow. So here's the $1 million piece to the puzzle. The mitochondrial DNA comes only from the mother. Really? And there's no paternal. I mean, the nuclear genome is, dad and mom, the sperm and the egg, and they share chromosomes. Not so with mitochondria. They're strictly maternal. And so we know then that the legacy of the health of the cell, the mitochondrial health, is derived from the health of the mother. So if you can corrupt the health of the mother that's giving birth, you've got the whole progeny. Yep. That's a slam dunk to the destruction of that people. That's right. That's right. If she has her mitochondria damaged, poisoned, intoxicated, compromised, and she has children, they inherit the mitochondria from the mother. That's the child's legacy. Now, it doesn't mean you can't restore and resuscitate mitochondria, but the child's starting out at a severe disadvantage.
Right.
I mean, look at autism.
Autism. Yeah.
You know,
Of course, I think, brother, that autism is 100% a result of these filth that they have put upon us. I don't know if you agree with that, but I tend to.
I would tend to say that's probably more than not. If you look at the rates of autism increasing over the last 50 years schedule, of course, there's lots of toxic ingredients, the adjuvants, as they refer to them in these concoctions.
Mhm.
When they allegedly took out the mercury back some years ago, they just increased the aluminum.
Oh, that's nice. Take out the mercury and bring in the dog and put out the cat.
That's right.
Take out the mercury. We don't want that, and put in the aluminum, which is very toxic. Yeah.
And they went to nanoparticle aluminum, so it's much more easily able to pervade the body and get into the brain.
Yeah, that's great.
And that's on the package inserts. I mean, I'm not speaking wildly here. You can go and look at the package inserts and verify it for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
So it's interesting here that we have this critical reliance on mitochondrial health, and the mitochondria do so much, and yet they again only come from the maternal line. So if you look back at the health of mom and grandmom, you can get a sense of the child's legacy.
Yeah. That's frightening.
Isn't it, though?
I mean, look at these generations of American now. You see these typical white American young men. They are nothing compared to the World War II manhood.
Right.
Or the manhood even before that. It's not hardy. It's not vigorous. It's not contending. It's not a real fighting manhood to seek to win and build something. It's a passive manhood that seems to be weak and with no real vision to succeed or to accomplish something. They're waiting for something to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't go get it. And I think our generation of the baby boomers was really last generation to go get it.
Mm-hmm.
Be serious about it. Because we had the least amount of government that we could depend on, and we still were eating some good food. But these last three generations, it's just awful. And as I know the Jesuits have done experiments with cats, and they'll give the cat something to eat so the offspring is weaker and then weaker. And so it becomes smaller and smaller. And so they did the same thing to us.
And when you take away a cell's energy, then the person who's hosting all that is looking for the least demanding, the easiest, the simplest answer to everything in life, because they haven't got the energy capacity to deal with anything, mental, physical, or otherwise.
Right.
So we're being sold a whole bunch of products based upon convenience, because everything is too much effort, because nobody has any energy.
Nobody has any energy. And it takes energy to think. It takes energy to write a book. It takes energy to evaluate facts, to come to conclusions. That all takes energy. And then when you have a news on that they're going to give you all the facts so they can give you the decisions, everybody just doesn't. Most people don't want to dig into what they have said and find the facts. Just like you said, they don't have energy.
That's right. That's right. And here's the double rub, is that even for our bodies to detoxify, even the normal detoxing functions, which are necessary in our liver and all of our body, energy is required to detoxify. So the less energy you have, the less you're able to empower your natural, not to mention any kind of therapeutic detoxification. Where's the energy going to come from?
Right. I remember Max Gerson in his book, The Gerson Therapy. He said it takes 90 days to be able to seriously recover from cancer. And if you don't have 90 days worth of energy, you're probably not going to do it.
Mm-hmm. Well, to follow that protocol, you have to have some energy to even do it. I mean, I know a couple of people that are doing that, and the amount of effort and the juicing and the whole protocol is very demanding and takes a lot of your time and attention.
Yep, and also
and here you are sick, and the colonics and everything else. So if you're already compromised and already sick, and you don't have any energy, it's a tough push.
Mm-hmm. Yes, it is.
Now, let me add one more layer on top of that layer. Then we notice
Okay.
the mitochondria come from the mother, but here's the part that's really interesting. And I heard this from there's a lot of podcasts online with a Dr. Jack Kruse with a K, Kruse. He's a very interesting retired neurosurgeon. And he has said that because we have these two distinctly different genomes in our cells, that the mitochondrial function and the mitochondrial genome actually alter the expression of the nuclear genome.
So the nuclear genome is subordinate to the mitochondria genome.
Yes, and if your mitochondria are trashed, the genes in the nuclear genome take over, and that's where medicine is focusing on all these gene therapies and gene splicing and CRISPR technology. But the real power of control is in the mitochondrial health, and you can silence those nuclear genes so you don't have the genetic tendencies. So it's a really, to use the proper term, it's an epigenetic effect, means on top of the genes.
Mm-hmm.
So we really want to focus on in our choices and our food and our life, how do I take care of my mitochondria? I mean, for a lot of Americans, it's how do I not poison them every day?
That's right.
Right?
Absolutely. I mean, health, we have the best health when we go to the deepest portion of our cells and then figure out what it takes for them to be healthy. And you're answering it with the mitochondria topic.
Without that, without energy, nothing else is going to function. How does the body repair itself? How do you deal with the repair of stress and making new bone cells and everything that, as you mentioned earlier, we have a turnover rate in our body that requires energy.
That's right. That's absolutely right. It requires energy. Mm-hmm.
Now, here's an interesting part, going back to my earlier comment that we have to include now light in our definitions of nutrients, because what aspect that's external to us actually stimulates mitochondrial function? And that's actually infrared light.
Infrared light.
Infrared, red and infrared light, both will stimulate the proteins. We talked earlier about these complexes inside the mitochondria that move the electron from what they call complex 1, complex 2. It's very logical, it's very linear, but that's in fact what they're called in the scientific literature. But those proteins are stimulated, they're enhanced in functionality by infrared and red light.
Wow.
Isn't that interesting?
Sure is. I went to a meeting many, many years ago with the National Health Federation. They had doctors speaking. And one of the guys was from Wyoming, kind of a cowboy kind of doctor. But his specialty was infrared light. And
it's becoming a whole thing now. We're understanding a lot about what it does, how it works, and the importance of it.
he said the day is coming when any medical doctor worth his salt will have infrared light therapy on everybody that comes to see him.
I think we're there.
Yep.
What's interesting is that around 43% of sunlight is red and infrared spectrum.
Is that right?
Yeah.
We can't see it.
No.
But it's there making us healthy.
Exactly. So that goes back then to, if we looked at what the eye does, the eye has two critical functions, and one that we all value highly is the camera function of the eye, to be able to see and focus, read, and not trip over the cat and all these kinds of wonderful things. So the camera function of the eye, and that's what uses the visible spectrum, the colors we can see. But the other part of the eye's role is to use the non-visible light, which is the ultraviolet and the infrared, and that's the signaling functions that the eye provides, because we can't see those wavelengths. But not only the eye sees, again, even if you were out in the sun, let's say you're out midday and you have your skin exposed and you don't have any sunscreen on there, all that infrared and red light is going to penetrate the body. It penetrates more than you might think, and stimulate the mitochondria in your muscles, in your abdomen, in your belly, in your back. Pretty amazing.
And that, in conjunction with D3, really makes you healthy.
And this is free.
Uh-huh.
This is free. I mean,
'Cause you
we
get
just have to know we have to go outside and expose some skin.
yeah. So you're getting D3 out of the sunlight as well as the red light stimulating the mitochondria.
Well, the D3 will depend upon the time of year and your latitude. And the vitamin D stimulation is coming from UVB, the B spectrum of ultraviolet radiation.
Okay.
And in the heart of winter, where the ground is frozen, there's usually not much or any UVB because of the angle of the sun. But we get plenty of UVA, and you can tan with UVA, but you don't make vitamin D until the angle of the sun is 50 degrees or higher off the horizon. So a lot depends on where you live.
I see.
It's really interesting. So what have we done as intelligent humans, right? We put glass windows in our home. Right?
It keeps out all the good UV and the good light.
Yeah, exactly. And if you really want good windows, you get the low E glass, right? And you can pay more for that. And that blocks even more of the infrared because we think of heat as infrared, which it is. And 100% of the UV is blocked.
Sounds like a death sentence to me.
So here we are sitting in a beautiful solarium in our home. We have panels and big windows, and it's all low E, really expensive glass. And we've already filtered the spectrum of light that our body's receiving. That's why you can't tan behind glass, behind a window. Because the glass blocks all the UVB.
Oh, the UVB, because there's A, B, and C.
Right.
UV, and so it's blocking the B, which I think is what they use in the tanning beds.
I believe so. Yeah,
I think they have A and B choices. Yeah. That makes perfect sense.
The fact is, we need both. I mean, it's hard. Everybody wants to go back and say, this is a good one, this is the bad one. Well, it doesn't really work that way. We need both. We need the whole spectrum, but we have to know that it's important to get.
Yeah. Amen.
Because if you go outside and get full spectrum sun, and it's different between the morning and the midday. So if you go out at sunrise or just right before sunrise, it's almost all infrared and red because the sky looks what color? Orange, red, pink. That's all the infrared coming up.
So if you're going to eat fish, you should be eating fish that get light into their systems rather than are at the bottom of the ocean, scraping the bottom there is crabs and you name it. Shouldn't we be eating fish that's up towards the surface, getting light in their eyes?
Well, probably. Fish have their own unique contribution because of the fatty acids, which we can get into, and how that actually helps to shuttle the electrons in the brain. It's amazing what they have put together and how much light does to us when we have it. And now we're suffering so much in our society by the filtering we've done of light, by having glass, and then, of course, teaching people to be afraid of the sun and putting SPF 125 on their skin, and they've got dark sunglasses, and their body and all the signaling functions in their body are totally blanked out from any natural signal.
You couldn't plan it better.
Oh, it's incredible. So when you go back to the morning example we just mentioned about going outside, and it's just about sunrise, and you see that beautiful pink light of that morning. It's all red infrared and a little bit of blue, but there's no ultraviolet because of the angle. It's all blocked out. Same at sunset. The sunsets are beautiful orange and pink and all those warm colors because of the angle, but that's where you can go outside and you get all the infrared. And it's very beneficial to the body. So if you had worked hard and you had sore muscles and you want to really support the mitochondria, you just get some infrared on your legs and arms and back, and you help support the mitochondrial function.
I see.
Pretty amazing. And again, it's free to access as long as we know we should do it.
Really, that's why every family should have an infrared machine in their house.
I think so, especially if you have a part of the year where you're indoors because it's cold and wintry, and maybe it's too cold to go out and expose any skin. Where are you going to get the infrared?
Right. Where are you going to get the infrared?
Or you're going to get the ultraviolet. We haven't even talked about ultraviolet. It's a whole nother conversation, maybe for another day. But the infrared is very critical and very safe to use. You just have to, like anything, use it wisely and intelligently if you're using bulbs. But if you go outside in the daylight, you're getting the entire color spectrum that shifts with the time of day.
Right.
So if you go out midday at noontime, when the sun is nearly overhead, you have all the infrared and red, but you have the blue mixed in because of the angle of the sun being overhead. So you have the whole color spectrum, all 7 primary colors.
So that's why we see people that work outside are generally healthier than people that work inside.
Right.
You could probably give them both the same exact diet, and the people that work inside are not as strong, not as healthy as those that are working outside.
Yeah, and that's been studied and looked at. Even, the whole thing today in nutrition has been about the microbiome, and you and I have talked about this, and you're well aware of the importance of our microbiome and probiotics and good bacteria and all that. But they did a study some time back in the equatorial regions, and they took people who were, indigenous to that latitude near the equator, and they measured their microbiome, the population of bacteria. And then they changed their diet dramatically to a highly processed, diet, all the crappy foods we would think of normal here, which they don't eat. And because of the
I
light,
always call it, Doc, I always call it white man's corporate food. It'll
there
kill
we go.
Yeah.
Because of the constancy of the light on their body, and because they don't wear a lot of clothes, their microbiome doesn't change.
Mm-hmm.
It's resistant to the change from the food. But if you take somebody who is, dressed up with 14 layers of clothing and SPF 95 on, and you change their diet, it does change the microbiome.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't that interesting?
It is. It's fascinating, and then they start to get sick.
Exactly.
They start to become amenable to any little thing that's going on.
Right.
So, yeah.
Right. So it's all beautifully integrated, interwoven. Everything is interconnected. We're beginning to see a greater appreciation for that. And again, a lot of these things are just the awareness and knowledge of, okay, I think I'm going to go outside today and I'm not going to wear sunglasses. I'm going to take my regular reading glasses off or my contacts out so I can get some full spectrum light into my eye, into my brain, which sets my body clock. My circadian pattern comes off that morning light.
Mm-hmm.
And everything in our day, everything our body does, every endocrine system is keyed off knowing whether it's dark or light cycle.
We're just like the animals.
Yeah.
I hear the rooster going off at 5 o'clock in the morning.
Exactly.
That's because the light's coming up and he's raring to go and he's going to crow. But without that light, he's not going to do any crowing. Makes sense.
That's right. And he's not wearing sunglasses. I'll bet you he would crow if you put sunglasses or contacts on the rooster.
Probably not.
Because the brain and the whole endocrine system wouldn't know literally what time it is without that morning light. Everything synchronizes off that morning light. Endocrine system, everything synchronizes off that. So if your body doesn't know what time it is, how does it know when to secrete anything?
That's right.
Everything is chaos.
Your body doesn't know what time it is. Not us knowing what time. If your body doesn't know what time it is. It makes perfect sense.
Right. And that's a biological function. It's not a mental function.
Yeah, biological function. Mm-hmm. And it has its own knowledge, its own method of repair, its own chain of command that we have nothing to do with.
Correct.
Except feed it, right? Or
well, I guess we can knowingly or unknowingly work with it or against it. I mean, the whole purpose of talking about this as we are now is to give people the insight to understand, wow, I didn't realize it was that important.
Isn't this some of the technology that the med beds are based on?
I don't know. I would assume you'd have to have some kind of electron, photon, energetic component because that's what drives everything.
Yes.
I'm speculating, of course, but I would think so because, if you get downstream, which is where modern medicine likes to function with manipulating this hormone, take this thyroid medication, take this estrogen. It's all downstream control, and it's very difficult to precisely control. If you go upstream to the beautiful self-regulatory functions our body has, the body knows how to adjust that.
Right.
Right?
Right. And a good doctor knows how to enhance that.
Exactly.
He's working with that knowledge, that internal knowledge, to facilitate what needs to be done. And that is primarily Oriental medicine. And it has nothing to do with oil-based Rockefeller Jesuitical allopathic medicals.
Right.
Monopolies. Yep.
Yeah, because all the energetic components of medicine as it was evolving here in the 1800s was stripped out, as you know, with the Flexner Report and the Rockefeller. Anything that was energetic and not patentable and synthetic, they didn't want the schools to have.
You ever seen a picture of Abraham Flexner?
I have.
Don't you feel he's one of the most evil-looking individuals you've ever seen?
There were a lot of people back then that didn't look too kindly, you know.
He looked just like his supporter, John D. Rockefeller.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, the Crypt Keeper.
Evil. Yeah.
Yeah, it looks like a walking corpse in some of the photos I've seen.
And remember, Rockefeller was working for the Jesuits. There's a book called The Career of John D. Rockefeller, written in 1912, and he tells how he patterned his Standard Oil Trust after the Jesuit order, and he considered himself to be the Black Pope.
Is that right?
Yes, it's in that book. And when you see that one, then it makes perfect sense that he would be backing this Flexner Report and all this allopathic medicine and driving the real physicians out of work, out of the culture, so we can become a sickened, drug-based, intoxicated, med-infected culture. Does that make sense to you?
Well, it does, but from all that I've read over the years and people who have chronicled the history, those wealthy families, Carnegie and so forth, they didn't use that themselves. They used homeopathy and they used natural medicine.
They did.
But they invested for the profits in the pharmaceutical petroleum-based medicine because that was the business.
That was the business in conjunction with killing the targeted population of the country. Let us do evil that good may come and fulfill the Counter-Reformation Council of Trent.
Yep. And I think, if I remember my history, it was Frederick Gates who was his right-hand man who kind of orchestrated much of the takeover of medicine at that time because it was a profitable venture, but it was also part of his eugenics.
Eugenics, yes. Eugenics is based upon a conspiracy. A conspiracy to kill, to weaken a targeted population. They're not studying it to see its strengths, to enhance its strengths as proper eugenics would be used. They're studying it to weaken and to ultimately destroy them.
I heard somebody once say the word eugenics, which EU, the U, like euthyroid, means good or balanced. It should be dysgenics.
Yes, that's right, dysgenics.
Because they're selecting for the unhealthy properties, not the healthy properties.
Right. So instead of give eugenics a bad name, the word.
Right.
And should have had, what'd you say, dyseugenics?
Dysgenics or dyseugenics, but dysgenics would be the term I heard being proposed. It's selecting for the most degraded properties or qualities.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
Yes, makes perfect sense. So we've been talking about the mitochondria and a few other topics that I thought I'd put you to the test and see if you knew anything about it. And of course you do. You probably read all the books. You probably taught it.
Yeah. Well, I try to keep up because I just like to know. And if I hear something like this, and I just say, okay, let me dig into it further and let me listen to more knowledgeable people, because even if you're a medical doctor or a researcher, again, this is new information. If you've been out of school for 30 years, as I have been, you didn't get it back then.
That's right.
It was not known.
Yeah.
So we all have to keep up and keep learning and keep progressing, and of course check the facts and check the resources and make sure we're not being led down a path that is deleterious. But this is interesting stuff, but it fits with the natural logic of biology.
Yes, very good word, young man. Deleterious. That's my word for the day. That's my challenging word for the day. Thank you so much for that.
That's a good word. We should all get one good word per day, right?
Yes, we should. And use it in a sentence a couple times so we can use it when we need to. Mm-hmm.
I agree.
So my question is, Doc, am I deleterious to you?
No.
Well,
What's the word we would use?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay.
But
Well,
I hope in our discussion today that some of the listeners hope that the curiosity is piqued.
mm-hmm.
There's plenty more people can dig into. There's some wonderful, like I said, podcasts if people want to jump into it. It's almost like jumping into the deep end of the pool, but I just tell people just, take it step by step.
Mm-hmm.
You'll get some. There's been podcasts I've listened to with, really complex people talk. I'd listen to it 4 times.
Yeah. Yeah, me too.
And take notes.
Yeah, I do that with some books.
Oh.
I didn't get the author's purpose. I got to read it again.
Mm-hmm.
And then maybe again. Yeah, makes perfect sense.
Well, you like me. You want mastery of the material. You don't want to just have, I read that somewhere, and
Yep.
I don't want to waste my time. But I want to have enough to be able to share it and share it intelligently, and stimulate other people to say, "Wow, I want to know more about that. That's really intriguing. I didn't know that."
Amen. Totally agree, my brother. Indeed. So why don't you sum up our conversation today, my brother, and give your contact information, and we'll go.
Yeah, I mean, basically today we kind of jumped in. I mean, we kind of got deep into the topic of mitochondrial health and the fact that our cells have 2 distinctly different genomes, the nuclear and the mitochondria. Mitochondrial health and legacy comes from the mother. There's no paternal contribution. And we all need to learn how to take care of and protect our mitochondria. Especially, I would say, in the long-term picture, is women of childbearing age and before they have children should be especially cognizant of that. There's another good word, cognizant, right?
Thank you. Deleterious and cognizant.
That's our 2 words for the day.
That's right. That's right.
And if we just learn about this and start to make some habit changes, again, these are not expensive things to do. It's just a matter of knowing and applying it.
Mm-hmm. Amen. And keeping it simple.
Keep it simple.
Keep it simple.
You can get into this in great detail. It's a lot of quantum physics and stuff like that, which is fascinating. You don't have to know it.
Right. Don't have to know it.
It's there if you want it. It's there if you want it. And the depth and the science is there. And it gets really complicated. But the application, the takeaway is it's very user-friendly.
Sounds wonderful. All right, Doc, go ahead and give us your contact info, please.
Best way to reach me is through email, actually, and that would be very simply info at Center for Nutrition, one word, centerfornutrition.net.
Info at centerfornutrition.net. If I say that 3 or 4 times, I'll cut some new gray matter and I might remember. And can anybody send you a donation, or you have a Cash App or anything like that?
Working on that.
Okay.
Working on that. But at this point in time, maybe by next time we speak or the following, we'll have something set up to take care of that.
Sounds wonderful. And I just want to mention to the audience, that you practice nutritional counseling in your home, generally by phone, so people can call you and have appointments and talk with you. So just so that
individually I do it. I do it by Zoom. The first appointment's always video, so I can see who I'm talking to. And once they're established, if they want to use phone only, that's fine. But it is done on a case-by-case, individual-by-individual basis. Yeah.
Very good. Amen. All right, Dr. Jeff, thanks so much for being with us this evening. Brother Eric John Phillips and 24/7 World Podcast, interviewing Dr. Jeff Sullender, a double-boarded certified nutritionist, and has been doing it for over 40 years. And he is able to really address any topic that you can think of. So it's really delightful to be able to talk with him or have an appointment with him. So I encourage you to see him. He will help you. Your health will improve. And maybe you can improve my health, brother. Maybe I need to start calling you a little bit.
Well, we're all working on it as the years go by and the external challenges, which we're all well aware of, come at us. We have to stay on the cutting edge.
That's right.
We do.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much for being with us. Lord
My
bless.
pleasure.
And we'll be again together next Friday night.
Sounds great.
Okay.
All right.
Thanks, Doc.
Bye-bye.
Lord bless.